My sister mocked my husband when he lost his job. Said, "I knew you were a failure." And I laughed along with her. I watched that man work himself to the bone for 9 years. Dalton gave his blood to that company in Akron while I was already well established at Goodyear, making my $95K a year. He made $72K. And that difference weighed on me, you know? My mother always said, "Dalton's a sweetheart, Lorraine, but you married a deadbeat. You deserve better." When he came home that 4th of July night and told me the company had let him go, my sister Pamela was sitting at the kitchen table drinking a glass of wine. She looked at him with this mocking, contemptuous face, watching him standing there with the termination letter shaking in his hands, and said right in front of me, "I always knew this day would come, Dalton. People like you never get anywhere in life. And me?" I didn't defend him, just lowered my head, agreeing. "My name is Lorraine Ragsdale. I'm 36 years old, and until about 2 years ago, my life was completely different. I met Dalton almost 10 years ago at an alumni meetup in Cleveland, University of Cincinnati. I'd done business administration, he did computer science, graduated in 2008, right when the recession was starting. He was quiet. Kinda awkward when he talked about tech stuff, you know, things I didn't understand and didn't care to. But there was this calm way about him, steady. He wasn't the flashy type who promises the world. He was just there, the kind of guy who shows up when he says he will. We dated for 8 months, got married in a small ceremony, and moved into a duplex in Fairlawn we could barely afford. For the first few years, I thought I'd made a smart choice. He worked at a startup, Data Vault Systems, developing data storage stuff. His salary was $72K a year. Mine was better, way better. My family never let me forget that. My mom, Carol, retired teacher, always had very specific ideas about success. My older sister, Pamela, real estate agent, sells million-dollar homes in Cleveland, divorced twice, but always came out ahead. At Sunday dinners, Pamela would speak loud enough for Dalton to hear, "You're too good for him, Lorraine. You make more, you've got the better career. What does he bring to the table?" And Mom would shake her head. A doctor would have been nice. Or a lawyer. Someone with ambition. I'd laugh. Say Dalton was good to me. But deep down, I'd always get this nagging feeling. About 7 years into the marriage, Data Vault started having problems, trying to compete with Amazon, Google. But running out of money, Dalton came home one night and said the company was cutting bonuses, that there might be layoffs. "We're gonna need to tighten the budget, Lorraine. Maybe skip the summer trip." I remember sitting there looking at him and feeling angry. After all, I was making $95K a year managing corporate events for Goodyear. And he was asking me to tighten my budget? "Your budget, Dalton," I said. "I'm still getting my bonus. This is your problem, not mine." He didn't argue, just nodded and went back to the computer to work on that project he'd been developing since college. Never asked what it was. Didn't care. That's when Bradley showed up. Bradley Thornton, financial analyst at KeyBank in Cleveland. We met at a Goodyear corporate event. He was there representing the bank's investment clients. And man, he was everything Dalton wasn't. Confident, polished, the kind of guy who walks into a room and you notice. We talked about markets, strategies, stuff I actually cared about. At the end of the night, he asked for my number. "For professional networking," he said. But the way he smiled made it clear it wasn't just professional. I gave him my number. Convinced myself it was fine. That Dalton wouldn't even notice. But the truth? I wanted Bradley to notice me. Wanted someone to see me as more than the wife who makes more married to dead weight. Days later, Bradley texted, "Coffee to discuss collaborations." I said yes. We met, talked for 2 hours about everything except work. And when he walked me to my car, he kissed me. I didn't stop him. Kissed him back. And that's when everything started falling apart. Little did I know, I was digging my own grave when I laughed at my husband's fall while my family applauded. Go ahead and subscribe, because this story goes places you're not expecting. And leave a comment. Have you ever felt ashamed of someone you loved? Because I did. And I ended up discovering The real shame was somewhere else entirely. The affair with Bradley started the way these things always do. Slow. Careful. Text messages that could technically be explained away as professional. Coffee meetings that anyone could call networking. Until they couldn't. That first kiss in the parking lot turned into a second one a week later. Then a third. By the second month, we weren't even pretending it was about work anymore. Bradley would text me around 11 p.m., right when Dalton was in bed. Can't sleep. You awake? And I'd answer every single time we started meeting at hotels. Nothing fancy. Nothing that would leave a paper trail back to either of us. Bradley was careful about that. He'd book rooms under his company credit card, say it was for out-of-town clients. I told Dalton I had late meetings, networking events, client dinners. He never questioned it. Not once. Looking back now, I don't know if that made it easier or worse. The fact that he trusted me completely while I was lying to his face every single day. The sex was good. Better than good. Bradley made me feel wanted in a way Dalton hadn't in years. Maybe ever. He'd text me in the middle of the day just to say he was thinking about me. He'd show up at my office building unannounced with coffee. He made me feel like I mattered. But here's the thing about affairs. They're not sustainable. You can't build a life on stolen hours in hotel rooms and lies to your spouse. Eventually, something has to give. Around month 3, Dalton lost his job. That 4th of July night when he came home with the termination letter, I felt this weird mix of relief and contempt. Relief because now maybe the financial pressure would finally break him. Contempt because I'd been right all along. He wasn't strong enough. Wasn't ambitious enough. Wasn't enough. Pamela was there that night because we'd been planning to have a backyard barbecue, typical 4th of July thing. When Dalton walked in looking defeated, she didn't even try to hide her disgust. And I didn't stop her. Didn't defend him. Just sat there and let my sister tear him apart while he stood there holding that letter like it was a death sentence. 3 days later, I told him I wanted a divorce. Not because of Bradley. At least that's what I told myself. I wanted the divorce because I was tired of carrying him. Tired of being married to someone who couldn't keep up. Bradley was just the proof that I could do better. Dalton didn't fight me on it. That's what surprised me most. He just looked at me with these sad, tired eyes and said, "If that's what you want, Lorraine." No begging. No asking why. No demanding to know if there was someone else. He just accepted it. And somehow that made me angrier. The divorce moved fast. Faster than I expected. Dalton hired a lawyer. Some guy from a local firm that probably cost him whatever severance he'd gotten. I hired someone better. Someone who knew how to make sure I got what I deserved. We'd bought that duplex together in Fairlawn 7 years earlier. Put equal money down. Both our names on the mortgage. But I'd been paying most of the bills for years, and my lawyer made sure that came up. A lot. Dalton's lawyer tried to argue that he'd contributed equally to the household, that the income disparity didn't matter. But my lawyer crushed that argument in about 15 minutes. She pulled up bank statements showing that I'd covered 70% of our expenses over the last 3 years. Showed that I'd been the one paying for vacations, furniture, his car insurance when his company benefits ran out. By the end of the first mediation session, it was pretty clear how this was going to go. Dalton sat across the table from me looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His lawyer kept trying to negotiate for a fair split of assets, but my lawyer wasn't having it. She wanted the duplex, the car, and alimony. Dalton could keep his 401k and whatever personal belongings he wanted. I remember sitting there watching him stare at the paperwork like he couldn't believe what was happening. At one point, he looked up at me and said, "Lorraine, we don't have to do it like this." My lawyer cut him off before I could respond. My client is entitled to compensation for years of financial disparity in this marriage. If you'd like to contest that, we can take this to court. But I promise you, Mr. Weatherwax, you won't like how that turns out. Dalton's lawyer leaned over and whispered something to him. He shook his head, then signed the document in front of him. Just like that, I got the duplex in Fairlawn. Got the Toyota Camry. Got $42,000 in alimony paid up front from his severance package. Dalton got to keep his retirement account and whatever he could fit in a U-Haul. There was one clause in the divorce agreement that my lawyer insisted on. A waiver of any future claims to assets or income either of us acquired after the divorce was finalized. She called it standard protection. I called it smart. Dalton's lawyer tried to push back on it, said it was too broad. But Dalton signed it anyway. 6 weeks after I'd asked for the divorce, it was done. He moved out the same day the papers were finalized. I watched him load his stuff into a rental truck from the living room window. He didn't have much. Some clothes, his computer equipment, a few pieces of furniture I didn't want. Pamela was there with me, drinking wine and making comments. "Good riddance," she said when he drove away. "Now you can finally find someone who's actually worthy of you." I nodded. Texted Bradley that it was done. His response came back immediately. "Finally. We should celebrate," but something felt off. Like I'd just made a huge mistake. I pushed that feeling down, told myself it was just guilt, that I'd get over it. The first month after the divorce was strange. I kept expecting to feel relieved, free. Instead, I felt hollow. Bradley and I started spending more time together. Now that Dalton was out of the picture, we didn't have to hide. We could go to restaurants, be seen together, act like a real couple, except we didn't. Not really. Bradley would still text me late at night, still suggest hotel rooms instead of his place or mine. When I asked about it, he'd say it was about privacy, about keeping things discreet until enough time had passed. I told myself that made sense, that he was just being cautious, but then I noticed other things. He'd never introduced me to his coworkers, never mentioned me on social media, never invited me to work events even though we were both in finance and marketing circles. When I brought it up, he'd get defensive. I'm a private person, Lorraine. I don't broadcast my personal life. I let it go, because I didn't want to be that woman. The one who pushed too hard, asked too many questions, needed too much reassurance. Meanwhile, Dalton had disappeared. Moved into a small apartment somewhere in Cuyahoga Falls from what I heard. I didn't ask for details. Didn't want to know, but then my mom started asking questions. "Have you heard from Dalton? Someone said they saw him at the grocery store looking really rough." I shrugged. "Not my problem anymore, Mom." She gave me this look. Not disapproving exactly, but close. "You were married for 9 years, Lorraine. You could at least check on him." "Why? So he can guilt me into taking him back?" "No thanks," Pamela backed me up. "She's right, Mom. Dalton's a grown man. If he can't handle a divorce without falling apart, that's on him." But the truth was, I did wonder. Not because I missed him. I didn't. At least I told myself I didn't. But because a small part of me felt bad. Like maybe I'd been too harsh. Too ruthless. Then Bradley started pulling back. It was subtle at first. Text messages that took longer to get responses. Dates that got canceled last minute for work emergencies. Nights when he'd say he was too tired to meet up. When I confronted him about it, he acted like I was overreacting. "I'm just busy, Lorraine. It's not personal." But it felt personal. It felt like now that I'd blown up my entire life for him, he was losing interest. That's when I got the news that crushed me completely. I was at a Goodyear corporate event, making small talk with some executives. One of them, Richard Brennan, pulled me aside. "Lorraine, I need to talk to you about something sensitive. HR received a complaint. Someone said you've been having an inappropriate relationship with a KeyBank representative." My stomach dropped. "That's ridiculous." "Who said that?" Richard looked uncomfortable. "Bradley Thornton. He went to his superiors and said you'd been pursuing him aggressively, making unwanted advances. He's claiming harassment." I couldn't breathe. "That's not true. We've been seeing each other for months." "He pursued me. Do you have proof of that? Emails, texts where he initiated contact?" I thought about it. Bradley always called instead of texting when it mattered. Always booked hotels under his corporate account. Always kept everything verbal and deniable. He'd played me from the beginning. And now he was covering his tracks by making me look like the predator. Within 2 weeks, I was fired from Goodyear. Not officially because of Bradley. They called it restructuring. But I knew the truth. I lost my $95,000 salary, lost my corporate events job, lost the career I'd spent years building, all because I'd trusted the wrong person. Losing my job destroyed me in a way I hadn't expected. For years, my identity had been tied up in being successful, in making more money than Dalton, in being the breadwinner, in being someone important at a major company. And now all of that was gone. I tried to find another job, sent out resumes to every marketing firm and corporation in Ohio, but word had spread. People in professional circles talk. The rumor about inappropriate behavior with a vendor followed me everywhere. No one would hire me. Not for anything close to what I'd been making. By month 2 after getting fired, I was running through my savings. The $42,000 in alimony from Dalton was long gone, spent on legal fees and trying to maintain my lifestyle while I looked for work. The duplex in Fairlawn had a mortgage I could barely afford without my Goodyear salary. I ended up selling it. Took a loss because I needed cash fast. Moved into a cheap one-bedroom apartment in downtown Akron that smelled like mold and had paper-thin walls. Pamela stopped calling as much. Mom stopped inviting me to Sunday dinners. It was like they didn't know what to do with me now that I wasn't the successful one anymore. Now that I was the one who'd failed, Bradley ghosted me completely. Blocked my number. Blocked me on everything. I was alone, broke, unemployed, and I had no one to blame but myself. That's when I hit rock bottom. I got a job as a waitress at an Olive Garden in Fairlawn, the same town where I used to live in that duplex with Dalton, where I used to make $95K a year and feel superior to everyone around me. Now I was taking orders for unlimited breadsticks and dealing with customers who treated me like I was invisible. The job paid $11 an hour plus tips. On a good night, I'd make $150. On a bad night, $60. I went from a 6-figure salary to barely scraping by. And the worst part? I'd see people I used to know. Former co-workers from Goodyear. Clients I'd worked with. They'd come in with their families, and I'd have to pretend I didn't notice the pity in their eyes when they recognized me. One night, about 14 months after my divorce from Dalton, I was working a double shift. It was 11 p.m. and I was exhausted. My feet hurt. My back hurt. I smelled like garlic bread and cheap wine. During my break, I sat in the back room scrolling through my phone mindlessly. That's when I saw it. A LinkedIn notification. Someone from Data Vault Systems had updated their profile. I clicked on it out of curiosity. And there it was. A headline that made my blood run cold. Data Vault Systems acquired by West Coast tech giant. Proprietary compression algorithm SailNets, $52 million. I scrolled through the article, my hands shaking. The algorithm had been developed by Dalton Weatherwax, the same project he'd been working on for years, the same thing I'd dismissed as unimportant, the same obsession I'd mocked him for. The acquisition had closed 8 months earlier, after our divorce was finalized, and because of that waiver I'd signed, that standard protection clause my lawyer had insisted on. I had zero legal claim to any of it. Dalton Weatherwax, the man I'd called a failure. The man I'd divorced because he wasn't ambitious enough. The man I'd humiliated in front of my family. He'd just walked away with $38 million after taxes, and I was working double shifts at Olive Garden. I sat there in that break room staring at my phone, and something inside me just broke. All those years I'd spent looking down on him. All those Sunday dinners where I'd let Pamela tear him apart. That 4th of July night when I'd laughed along while my sister called him a failure. He'd been working on something worth $52 million. And I'd been too busy sleeping with Bradley to even ask what it was. This gets so much worse, trust me. Have you ever realized too late that you destroyed your own life? Because that's where I was. And I still had no idea just how deep the hole I dug for myself really went. Hit that like button and leave a comment with your thoughts. because I'm still trying to figure out where it all went wrong. I couldn't let it go. That LinkedIn post. That 52 million. For days, I kept reading the article over and over. How had Dalton gone from unemployed to multimillionaire in less than 2 years? I started checking his social media. He didn't post much, but there were updates. New profile picture. Check in at some expensive restaurant. Nothing flashy, but you could tell. The subtle confidence. I wanted to reach out. Maybe congratulate him. But what would I even say? So I did something stupid. I called my divorce lawyer. Asked if there was any way to contest the settlement. She sighed like she'd been expecting this. You signed a waiver, Lorraine. Very clear, very binding. You have no claim. But I didn't know it was worth anything. That's not relevant. You were aware he was working on something. You chose not to ask. There's nothing I can do. I hired another lawyer anyway. Dennis Morton. Strip mall office between a nail salon and a pawn shop. Should have been my first red flag. He said maybe there was a case. Fraudulent concealment. It would cost $5,000 up front. I didn't have it. But I had credit cards. Dennis filed a motion to reopen the divorce. Claimed Dalton had concealed assets. His response came fast. From Buckingham, Doolittle and Burroughs, big firm. Expensive firm. His lawyer, Marissa Chen, destroyed me in court. She had bank statements showing Dalton had been transparent. Emails where I'd told him I didn't care about his tech stuff. Testimony from our mediator saying I'd pushed for the waiver. Judge Cosgrove denied my motion in 3 minutes. Then came the kicker. Marissa asked for legal fees. The judge ordered me to pay $1,800, 90 days. I sat there feeling like the floor had opened up. Dennis said we could appeal. I asked with what money? He didn't have an answer. I went from a 6-figure salary to arguing with a 22-year-old Olive Garden manager about whether I'd refilled enough breadsticks. The American dream, ladies and gentlemen. The legal fees broke me completely. I couldn't pay. My credit cards were maxed. My lease was up and I couldn't renew. I moved to a studio apartment in a rough part of Akron. Bars on windows. Roaches in the kitchen. That's when Pamela finally called. First time in months. Said Mom told her about the lawsuit. What were you thinking? I was thinking I deserved something. She laughed. Actually laughed. You divorced him because you thought he was a loser. You don't get to come back now. I reminded her she was the one who told me to leave him. Who spent years saying I could do better. Long pause. Then she said something that made my stomach drop. I never actually thought Dalton was that bad. He was quiet and boring, yeah. But loyal. Treated you well. Better than you treated him. Then why did you spend years tearing him down? Because I was jealous. You had a husband who actually loved you. Who stayed faithful. And I'd been divorced twice by men who only wanted my money. So I tore him down. And you were stupid enough to listen? She hung up. I sat there trying to process what she'd just admitted. My sister had manipulated me for years. And I'd destroyed my marriage because of it. I blocked her number. Blocked my mom's too. Funny how I divorced him because he made $72K and I made $95K. Now he's sitting on $38 million and I'm Googling, can debt collectors take your kidney? Meanwhile, I started hearing about Dalton. Not because I was looking. Because people talk. He'd started a foundation for technology education. Donated to University of Cincinnati. Paid off medical debt for families in Cuyahoga Falls. He wasn't bragging. No interviews. No social media posts. But people knew. Dalton Weatherwax was using his money to help people. And me? I was serving unlimited breadsticks. One night Bradley came in. With a date. Some young woman who looked expensive. He didn't see me at first. Then we passed each other near the bathrooms. He stopped. Smirked. Lorraine. I heard you were working here. How's that going for you? I walked past him without saying anything. You know you've hit rock bottom when you see your ex-husband's charity work trending on LinkedIn while you're stealing toilet paper from the Olive Garden bathroom, too. Years after the divorce, I was still at Olive Garden. Still in that studio. Still paying debt. But something had changed. I'd stopped feeling angry. stopped feeling like a victim, and started accepting that I'd done this to myself. One night I came home to an envelope under my door. No return address. Dalton's handwriting inside was a letter. He said he knew about the lawsuit, about the legal fees, about Pamela's confession that she'd manipulated me, that she'd introduced me to Bradley specifically to destroy my marriage. He'd known for a while. Pamela had reached out bragging about it, thinking he'd want revenge too, but he didn't, because even after everything, he understood I'd been manipulated, that Pamela had poisoned me against him for years. The letter said he'd paid off my legal fees, all $1,800, that I didn't owe him anything. The last line destroyed me. I hope you find what you're looking for, Lorraine. Because it was never me. I sat on that floor and cried. Not because of the money, but because even after I'd humiliated him, divorced him, tried to sue him, he'd shown me more kindness than I deserved. That's when something shifted. I realized I couldn't keep living like this. Bitter, broke, blaming everyone else. I enrolled in a community college counseling program. Used the money Dalton had freed up by paying my debt. It took me 3 years part-time while working at Olive Garden, but I finished. I became a licensed therapist specializing in relationship counseling, helping couples navigate the same toxic patterns that destroyed my marriage, helping people recognize manipulation, helping them make better choices than I did. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who destroyed her own marriage now helps others save theirs. My practice is small. I make $60,000 a year, nothing close to what I made at Goodyear. But for the first time in my life, I'm actually helping people instead of just climbing a corporate ladder. 3 years after becoming a therapist, I met someone. His name is Aaron. He's a high school teacher, makes $48,000 a year, drives a used Honda, lives in a modest apartment, everything Pamela would have mocked. Everything I would have looked down on 10 years ago. But he's kind. He listens. He shows up when he says he will. He doesn't need me to be impressive or successful. He just wants me to be myself. We've been together for 8 months. It's the healthiest relationship I've ever had. Because I'm finally healthy enough to be in one. I told him everything. About Dalton. About Bradley. About Pamela. About the lawsuit. About hitting rock bottom at Olive Garden. He listened without judgment. You're not that person anymore, he said. People change. You changed, did I though? I still think about Dalton sometimes. About what my life would have been like if I'd just asked about his algorithm. If I'd supported him instead of mocking him. If I'd defended him that 4th of July instead of laughing along with Pamela. I looked him up recently. Out of curiosity, not longing. He's still single, still running his foundation, still living quietly despite having $38 million. A mutual friend said he dates occasionally but nothing serious. That he seems content but alone. That he works constantly, and I wonder if we both lost something we can never get back. He lost the ability to trust. I lost everything, and gained something else entirely. My therapy practice is growing. I have clients who drive an hour to see me because word spreads that I actually understand what it's like to make catastrophic relationship mistakes. That I don't judge. That I've been where they are. Aaron wants to move in together. I told him I need time. Not because I don't love him, but because I need to make sure I'm choosing him for the right reasons. Not as a placeholder. Not as redemption. But because he genuinely makes my life better. I'm learning what healthy love actually looks like. It's not about salary or status or impressing family. It's about showing up. About honesty. About choosing each other every day. Things Dalton tried to show me for 9 years while I was too busy judging him. Last week, Dalton reached out. First time in 5 years. A simple text. I saw your therapy practice website. You're doing good work. I'm proud of you. I stared at that message for an hour. Wrote and deleted 15 different responses. Finally sent back, thank you. That means more than you know. He didn't respond. But he didn't need to. I think about what my life could have been. If I'd made different choices. if I'd listened to Dalton instead of Pamela, if I'd valued loyalty over salary, if I'd defended him instead of betraying him, I'd probably be living in a nice house, maybe with kids, financially secure, married to someone who built something worth $52 million. But would I be happy? Would I have learned what I needed to learn? Would I have become someone who actually helps people instead of just using them? I don't know. And that's the thing about life. You can't go back and test the alternate timeline. What I do know is this. Dalton has $38 million and a foundation that helps hundreds of people. But he's alone. He works constantly. He never remarried. Never had kids. He built an empire but lives in it by himself. I have $60,000 a year and a therapy practice in a strip mall. I have Aaron who makes me laugh. I have clients who trust me. I have a life that feels real instead of performed. Dalton won financially. I won something else. Purpose, maybe. Peace. The ability to sleep at night knowing I'm not hurting anyone anymore. Or maybe we both lost. He lost the ability to trust anyone enough to let them in. I lost 9 years with someone who actually loved me and traded it for nothing. This gets so much worse, trust me. Have you ever realized too late that you destroyed your own life? Because that's where I was. And I still had no idea just how deep the hole I'd dug for myself really went. Hit that like button and leave a comment with your thoughts. Because I'm still trying to figure out where it all went wrong. So here's what I need to know. He has millions he'll never fully enjoy. I have purpose that finally matters. In the end, did anyone actually win? Or did we both just lose different things? Hit subscribe if you've made it this far. And leave a comment, not with judgment, just honesty. Because 5 years later, I still don't know if I made the right choice leaving therapy over corporate ambition. Or if I just traded one cage for another.